Hi, I'm Mark McPherson and welcome to this presentation on how to master tough conversations and deal with difficult people. Now, these two topics go well together. There are certainly some overlaps, but there are most certainly some differences. So if you bear with us throughout the presentation, then we'll deal with both of those topics as we go. Tough conversations, difficult people, they most certainly are all around us. Now, throughout this presentation, if you notice I look down like this every now and then, I am looking at my notes. I need to keep a good tack on the time that we're using. Hopefully your tough conversations and your difficult people don't end up quite like this, but this presentation is really for people in all sorts of workplaces. So I do work with teachers, for example, and school executives. I work with people in their family relationships, and even people who are in social settings also sometimes have to master tough conversations and deal with difficult people. Sad but true. I know what it's like having these tough conversations. I know what it's like dealing with difficult people, and this is what we want to do sometimes, just put our head on the wall and go, why me? Well, a little bit about me before we start though. My name is Mark McPherson, and I do have a website, and I do have an email address, and I'm unable to answer any of your questions during the presentation. Please send me an email or go to my website if you like, use the contact form, ask me a question, and I most certainly will get back to you. I have been around in all sorts of workplaces, places like that, places like this where you've got lots of people working together, so I know what it's like, and we'll try and make sure that this whole presentation fits all the different types of workplaces that you deal with. Yes, as I said, I do have a website, so if you want to go there and send me a message, please go right ahead. What I am into is not just mastering tough conversations, but also dealing with difficult people, but also what I call instilling best practice behaviour. And I think when we put best practice behaviour, mastering tough conversations, and also dealing with difficult people together, I think we really do have a much better workplace and much better relationships. A few things before we go any further. A few things like, it's not a workshop. Now, that makes a few good things that are good, and it makes a few things which aren't so good for us. It means I can't look around the room and see who's having trouble or doesn't understand who's got their hand up. And it also means there's a lot of activities we simply can't do. Things like think, pair, share. If you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. There's hundreds of activities we can do in workshops which we just can't do today. We can't cover everything in 90 minutes. So some of you will be wondering, oh, why didn't we do this, or why didn't we do that? Well, the simple reality is we just simply can't cover everything. I say it can be upsetting. That's because sometimes this topic brings up all sorts of issues for people. Things in their home, things in their workplace, things that aren't going well. So maybe upsetting is too strong a word, but just be aware of the fact that sometimes this whole topic can bring up all sorts of emotions and feelings. First things first, we're not going to dive straight into this is how you deal with that situation, or this is how you deal with that situation. We need to do the groundwork. I've run many, many workshops where at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if people have not been present, for example, for the first 2 hours and they've missed out on that groundwork, they really do flounder. However, you will get strategies tonight in this presentation that you can immediately use. And please remember, this is Mark McPherson's view of the world. Your workplace, your social setting, your home is different to my experience. A few other things that I do really like to concentrate on are things that I call real life scenarios. If I'm running a workshop or a presentation, I can give you thousands and thousands of scenarios and case studies, but they're so much better if they come from you. So always think about real life scenarios, how they apply to you, how you can apply the strategies in your own life. I also don't use in my workshops what I call traditional or old style role plays. I use something which are a little bit harder but most certainly more beneficial, and we can't do those today either because it's not a workshop. So I work in the area of helping you practice your skills with things called real-life rehearsals and agent provocateur role plays. So just keep those in mind, that whatever we do in this presentation, we need to apply it. We need to develop our skills. So let's get cracking. And I am going to move it at quite a pace, as you've probably already noticed, because we do have a fair bit to cover. When I look to the future, I think there's some really big changes coming, and maybe they're already here. But people these days are communicating more and more with more and more people through more and more channels than they ever have done before. And it's hard on them. We have to communicate in ways that many of us haven't even been trained in. So sometimes it's not out in the field, like you saw that fellow there, but sometimes it's in offices. And you know what? Sometimes we're communicating with people who aren't even in the same office, perhaps not the same city, perhaps not even the same country. And it makes it rather difficult. But look, all we really want is for people to come to work and get on, do their job and have a good time. Sometimes they work by themselves, and maybe in a shop assistant situation or an owner of a business. Sometimes we have people working from home, and it's fine. But once again, they have to communicate with people. We don't always want people to come to work and just have a brilliant time and be silly. And also, when people are in their social settings, we want them to be able to master tough conversations and get on and, if necessary, deal with difficult people. So I'm trying to cover here material that's good for the workplace, good for social settings, and also good for the home. We don't always want people to come to work to be this excited, perhaps, but I'm sure we've all worked with people who are a little bit like that. So, the major problem, and this to me is really, really important at the crux of all of dealing with difficult people particularly, is that people break our standards of behaviour. But sometimes I don't think we're too sure exactly what our standards are, and I'm going to throw one at you right now. Is it okay to swear in the workplace? It's surprising how many people will say, no, it's not. And then something happens and I say, but hang on, you told me that you're not supposed to swear in the workplace. That, oh, it's okay to swear if you've dropped your coffee on the floor. So we need to be very careful when we talk about what our standards of behaviour are. Is it okay to swear in front of the kids at home? I'm sure different people have very different opinions about that. But look, what I've done is I've put together what I think are the 6 universal standards. We're not going to go into these in this presentation. That in itself is a half-day workshop to talk about what are these standards. But you'll see there the limits of my graphic design ability, because there's a word there that wasn't on the one line. But to me, standards of behaviour is what it's really all about when we're dealing with difficult people and some tough conversations. And I think we can put all of our standards under those six headings, pardon me. Some people seem to think when they're breaking standards that they're living on the set of Game of Thrones. And it's not a documentary, it's a bit of fiction, but some people think that they can carry on like some of those characters in the workplace, in the home, in social settings, in cafes, in licensed venues. And if you see me look down like this, I am looking at my notes, and I'm also looking at the time, so my apologies for that. Out on the street, we have people who seem to not know what is basic good manners. Now, some people say to me, but people should understand. And they most certainly should understand, but some people don't, and they break our standards. I have a standard of behaviour, and one of them is you do not put your finger in someone's chest like that and talk to them in that fashion. And I've always liked that picture because I think the woman there has got quite an interesting look. And of course, when we're dealing with difficult people, they're not always rude, nasty and upfront. Some of them are like this person here, which I'll just put down to being lazy and not performing at their best. It means we sometimes have to have tough conversations with people, and not all these tough conversations are, of course, with difficult people. I will mention once or twice in this presentation some of the tough conversations I've had with people that are not about poor behaviour. And one in particular is when I had to speak to my mother about the need for her to at least consider going into an aged care facility. It's a tough conversation. There's nothing particularly pleasant about it, but it's one of those conversations no doubt many of you have had. Now, before these conversations, we can become a little bit stressed and worried about them. We don't walk into these tough conversations, or we shouldn't, just by just strolling in. Sometimes they can be quite nerve-wracking just thinking about them. During them, they can be hard work. There's absolutely no doubt about that. A tough conversation is a tough conversation because it's tough. There's nothing pleasant about it, otherwise it would be called a conversation. After these tough conversations, it can still be quite stressful. Sometimes there's mountains of paperwork to be done, and sometimes way after we've had one of these conversations, the stress, the worry still goes on in our mind, and we're still saying to ourselves, why did I say that, or I should have said that, or why did they react like that? So tough conversations are tough before, tough during, and tough afterwards, and it's no wonder we sometimes put them off, and sometimes for way too long. But what actually makes these conversations tough? Now, I've talked about doing the groundwork, and I really think this is important, because if you're not sure what or why a tough conversation is tough, you have very little opportunity to actually do something about it and make it less tough. But I think there's a number of reasons. And the first one is that we care. If you don't care about these tough conversations, they're not a problem. I could just go to my mother and say, I think you should go to an aged care facility, you're old. Well, I wouldn't quite say it like that. But if we care, we do care about our staff relationships. We don't just tell someone that their behaviour is poor and just leave it at that. We care about them, we care about other people, and we care about the outcome. I think there's three reasons why we find tough conversations particularly tough, though. And one is the person. Our feelings towards them. Do we like the person? Do we not like the person? What dealings have we had with them before? Our relationship to them. Having some tough conversations with some people is easier, but when it's a member of the family, we've got emotions involved, we have a relationship with them, it's a different matter. The way they behave and their reaction. Sometimes during a tough conversation, if the person becomes agitated, stressed, emotional, it makes it tougher. What if they become angry? What if they look at you like this, as with a look of contempt? None of that is pleasant, that's for sure. So, the other thing that makes these things tough, of course, is the subject themselves. And sometimes it's personal business. One of the things about some topics when we're talking with people is there's some topics we just don't like talking about. I don't find it pleasant whatsoever talking to my mother about going to an aged care facility. There's nothing nice about it. Talking to someone at work about what you perceive as inappropriate or unacceptable, whatever the word might be, body odour. That's not pleasant. And that topic is something that we sort of shy away from. We don't like putting burdens on people. As a general rule, at least, we do not like giving people extra work. Yes, it might not be your fault that the person has to do extra work. Look, the boss didn't like your report, you have to redo it. That's not pleasant. It's a tough conversation. There's other times in these conversations when the subject matter can actually make us look incompetent. It's like we haven't done our job properly. On top of that, there is the thing about us in these tough conversations. Sometimes we have a lack of skills. And we need to admit that sometimes, that we're not as clever or as competent as we'd like to be in certain areas. Pardon me. There's also a fear of lack of skills. The number of people I've dealt with who said, oh, I couldn't have that conversation with them. They're up there in the hierarchy and I'm down there. I couldn't possibly do it. And I know in my heart that they can actually do it and do it well. But they lack confidence. Another thing that makes these tough conversations tough is when we haven't done our homework. Now, I have worked in an area where I defended and worked with people who were undergoing disciplinary action. I've also been on the other side of the coin where I've taken people through disciplinary action. None of it's pleasant, that's for sure. But one thing that I've found is when people don't do their homework, things come undone very, very quickly. And people have had bad experiences, and that can make it tough as well. So I reckon there are some particular types of tough conversations we all have to deal with. And this is the framework, and we need to get on top of this. There are people you deal with are simply hard to understand, follow, or deal with. I deal with a lot of organisations that have staff working on the front counters, dealing with the public. And sometimes, let's say 99% of the time, things work incredibly well. But that one person can absolutely ruin your day when you're saying to yourself, I don't know what this person is talking about. Or now they're going around in circles. I've explained it 3 times. So that's one of the tough conversations that we have to have. Giving bad news. I don't think people like giving bad news. People are redundant. There's been an illness or an accident in the family. You haven't got the promotion that you wanted. These conversations are tough. I'm well aware that some people have no trouble saying certain things to people, but for most of us, it's not pleasant. Asking someone in authority to do something. I have an acquaintance at the moment I'm working with, and she believes she deserves a pay rise, and she has to go and speak to someone in authority about she believes she should have a pay rise. So she's got to speak to someone in authority. It's a tough conversation. She's only going to get one chance at it, and if she blows it, she may not get another one for some time. Telling someone their behaviour is unacceptable. We've all had to do it. Those of us who are parents have most certainly had to do it. But telling someone who's maybe a peer, someone on your staff, someone above you, a family friend, a spouse, this is a different matter. So telling someone their behaviour is unacceptable is a tough conversation, and there are ways, and I will give you a way today which you can use to make sure it runs as smoothly as possible. But here's the thing. Sometimes when you tell someone their behaviour is unacceptable, you have to go to the next stage, which is actually to give a penalty, as I've called it. A punishment, I think, is too hard a word. But sometimes you have to say to people, John, I've told you 3 times that being late to work means whatever it happens to be. Parents know this full well. I've told you 4 times to tidy up. I've told you what will happen if you don't, and now here's the penalty, if you like. I've written this particular one like this because it comes from a blog, How to Give a Good Apology. Some people find it very tough to give a decent apology. Oh, if I've offended somebody, oh, it looks like someone's upset by something I said. It's not a real apology. So there is a 3-step method or script, if you like, that I've developed, which is on my website and a blog. And if you want to email me, I'm quite happy to post you some material or send you some material. The last one is giving compliments and avoiding the pitfalls. You wouldn't think this is a tough conversation. It's written like that, 9 handy hints, because I do have a blog on it, and that's the heading for that blog. But giving compliments, it's surprising how many people don't do it because they'll take it the wrong way, or they blurt in and give a compliment and it is taken the wrong way. So it can be a tough conversation. But because people break standards, what it also means is we need to sometimes have conversations with difficult people. And I've documented 52 types of difficult people. And I know that there's books around, believe me, I've got them stacked up next to my bed, and plenty of articles where they talk about the 6 types or the 8 types or the 12 types of difficult people. Well, it was easy. I took no time at all to document 52, and I'm sure there's an awful lot more. So I've grouped them. But there's a group of people around who are difficult. You know who they are. Unfortunately, you've had to deal with some of these people. And at work, at home, and in social settings as well, in social clubs. So some people don't pull their weight, and each one of those photos is actually a type of person who doesn't pull their weight. There's a group that have an exaggerated view of their importance. These are the people who think that rules don't apply to them. These are the people who really think that they're cleverer than everyone else. These are the people who take credit for things when it's not really theirs to take the credit for. There's another group of people around who hinder work, progress and productivity, and believe me, you know every one of these people. You know, we've got the loud mouth, we've got the motor mouth, we've got people who ramble on forever. We've got people who I call the diehard, the person who says, no way, we've been doing it like this for 30 years and I see no reason for changing something that's working perfectly. And the only thing that's going through your mind is, well, it's not working perfectly, and that's the problem. We also have people who sabotage and undermine. So we're upping the ante here a little bit. There's some people around who are just a bit lazy or think they know everything. There's people around who actually sabotage and undermine. And up in the top left is one of my favourite characters called the commitment breaker. And the commitment breaker is one of those people who says, yes, I will have the work done for you by 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Comes 4 p.m. and it's not done. Comes 5 p.m. it's not done. So when you see them the next day, they say, oh, well, 3 p.m. it sort of means close of business, and close of business really means 10 a.m. the next day, doesn't it? Well, no, it doesn't. So the commitment breaker is someone we've all had to deal with. They say they're going to do something and they fail to do it. We also have plenty of people around who's like the excluder. There's always someone in a workplace who feels excluded, and there's people who exclude other people. We've got people that I call the hogger. These are the people who have information, but they won't pass it on. Knowledge is power, as they think. So we have the hogger. We have people who steal things. We have the backstabber. And we have a particular person I call the nitpicker, that it wouldn't matter what you've written here, it can be brilliant. But lo and behold, I think that semicolon should be a full stop, or the full stop should be a semicolon, or whatever. I think there's a time for getting things right, but there's also a person I call the nitpicker. There's a group of people around that unfortunately you've also met. They belittle, they persecute, and they intimidate. These are the people up in the top left there, a person I call the space invader. And it's not always about sexual harassment or sexual assault. There's people around who sort of get in your face, as we call it. There's people who criticise, and they criticise all the time. It wouldn't matter what's going on. This is not right. I'm unhappy about that. This isn't working the way it should be. And complainers, and we have patronisers. And we have one there, the fellow who's the suit, and he's the third from the left, and got that funny look. And I call him the put-down merchant. These people think they can get away with saying some pretty terrible stuff. Oh, I was only joking. Oh, I didn't mean to hurt you. Oh, sorry, have I upset you? And I'll give you a technique for dealing with these people. We also have people who manipulate. People will impose on you. Oh, you're so good at doing this. Could you just help me do this for me, please? Or whatever it has with, they impose. And to use the colloquial expression, they sometimes suck up to you to get it done. And there's also the pleader as well. And up in the top right, we have the side tracker. And these are people who you want to talk to them about an issue, maybe a tough conversation, and they will take you down some path, and before you know it, you're saying, what are we talking about this for? How did this happen? And you've got to get yourself back on track. And they're masters at it. And last, of course, we have an aggressive bunch of people. Up in the top left, the demander. These are people who demand something, and people who work with the general public, work with lots of customers, know these people. They want something, and they want it now, even though you've said, I can't do that, or I'm not allowed to do that, or the law says I can't do it. Oh, I don't care, I want it now. Now, what this means is that these people create problems for us. They take up your time. They make extra work, they make you look bad, and they create an awful lot of stress. But here's the thing. A lot of books talk about difficult people, like here's the 6 behaviours or here's the 12 types of difficult people. Well, I documented 52, and I reckon they all have 3 things in common. Forget about the 52, it doesn't matter. You can't possibly work out strategies for 52 people. You can't look at someone in the face and go, oh, now hang on, I think you're a backstabber. Let's see what the book says about how to deal with that. They all have 3 things in common. And the first thing is that they are badly behaved. What they do is they break a standard of behaviour. And this is important, because if you can't work out what the standard of behaviour is, you are in trouble. I deal with so many people who say, I've got this bloke at work and he's just hopeless. I go, well, that won't cut it to say that they're hopeless. What is it they've actually done? Oh, they're always being annoying. I'm sure they are. What is the standard of behaviour that they have exhibited that you are unhappy with? Oh, you know, they just say stupid things. It's so important to make sure that when you're talking about a difficult person, you understand that they have behaved poorly. They've broken a standard of behaviour. We have them, and they have failed to get above it. If not, then maybe you just don't like them, their policies and their ideas. The second thing is that difficult people do not show remorse. Now, they might say, sorry. They might even sound sincere. I'm really sorry that it happened. But they do not show remorse for any period of time. And it's because the third thing they do is they repeat the behaviour. So we've all broken standards of behaviour. We've all said something to our spouse, our friends, our colleagues, and we've had to go back the next day and say, oh, Peter, sorry, yesterday I was out of line. That's what we do. But a difficult person doesn't show such remorse, and they repeat the behaviour. Even if it's in the one conversation over 10 minutes, they won't interrupt once, they'll interrupt many times. They'll use their finger more than once. They'll raise their voice more than once. So when I say they repeat the behaviour, it doesn't have to be over years. It can be within the one conversation. Now, this is important because later when we talk about how to deal with these people, you need to work out what it is they've done wrong. Because if you go up to somebody and simply say, oh, your behaviour yesterday wasn't any good, and they say, well, what about it? Oh, just generally, you've lost it. So there's a bunch of people around who seem to think that they can just do whatever they like and say whatever they like, and they only care about them, they don't care about you, and they don't admit to doing anything wrong. And unfortunately, they are most certainly around. And they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. But these people create problems for us, take up your time, they make extra work, and they make us look bad. And they give us headaches. This is the problem. They create work for us and they give us headaches. And we go home and we say to our spouse and friends, oh, I've got this bloke at work. Meanwhile, that person you're talking about, they're having a glass of wine, they're having dinner. They're fine, they've moved on. It's us who are left behind worrying about it. So, why are they like this? Be warned. There are so many people around who ask me, but why are they like that? Why do you think he did that? Why do you think he did that? And you'll just drive yourself crazy. But I think some people simply don't get it. Some don't care, and some hide behind things like it's a free country. So some people seem to just pursue happiness. As long as they're happy, then that's all that matters. And they have a bit of a I love me attitude. I can say this at a staff meeting and people will think I'm funny. Well, once they do, but the second and third time, no. There's a thing I call freedom of expression, and I see this on social media way too much where people say, oh, it's a free country. Well, it might be a free country, but it's not free of consequences or ramifications. And some people hide behind this. Oh yeah, it's a free country, oh, it's democracy, I can say what I like. Well, no, you can't. A democracy does not mean you can just simply say whatever you like to anyone about anything. There's also this other issue which I think Well, it most certainly worries me a little bit. There's this search for meaning. Too many people are trying to analyse other people. Oh, they think like that because there's something going wrong with their mind. They think like that because they want my job. They think like that because they're unhappy at home. It might be true, but don't spend too much time on it, right? I think we end up with real problems, and one thing we end up doing is just putting our head in the sand and hoping that all this stuff will magically go away. Well, it doesn't. So this presentation, of course, is for anybody who has dealt with any of those 52 types of people, anyone who has had to have any of those 7 types of tough conversations. But why do we bother? And this is the groundwork that I said really needs to be done. Honestly, it needs to be done. Why do we bother, and what's the point of it? Well, we want to make our life better. We want to do our job properly. Most of us at work, why are you having that tough conversation with Bill? It's my job. I'm supposed to make sure that people fill in the timesheet properly. I'm supposed to make sure that when people say they have a report done by a certain time, it's done. It's my job to make sure that people attend the staff meeting and get there on time and don't interrupt the presenter. So this is what we want, of course, and sometimes we end up with something that's a little bit different to that. But here's something that I think is really missing from a lot of the debate on this, and that is we want the person to do something. We don't have tough conversations for the fun of it. We want the person to do something. Now, sometimes when we're having giving an apology, for example, we want the person to say, oh, all is forgiven. Well, don't expect it. It may not happen. But what we want is the person to do something. When we have a tough conversation with somebody, whether it be someone at work or our teenage son or daughter, about their poor behaviour, we're not just shooting our mouth off for the fun of it. Well, I hope we're not. It's because we want their behaviour to get what I call above the line. Now, there are 3 main components, I think, of what we've got to cover in this presentation, and one is the words that we actually use. I'm going to use an expression now, and I'll use it later, dull and boring. The English language is rich, and it's full of wonderful words. You're belligerent. Your behaviour is disgraceful. You're not a team player, or whatever it happens to be. So there's a verbal component to whatever we say, whatever's going to come out of our mouth. There are most certainly the words themselves. And we need to choose wisely, but I actually think they need to be dull and boring. The next thing is there's a vocal component to when we have these conversations. Now, I don't know where this came from. Somebody gave me this, so if someone wants to own up or claim credit for this, please go right ahead. We put on characters, and I put on certain characters during this presentation already. Some of them I wish I didn't put on because I try and be a bit more chatty, but sometimes I come across as the school teacher and lecturing. I get that, and I am talking quickly. We need to be careful of our character we use, and you watch it. You put on different characters all the time. Hi, Bill. Thanks for coming to see me. It's really important. Bill, what I want to talk to you about is, you see how the character goes from friendly to more even, more level, and I just call it the school teacher's voice, or maybe the parent's voice. So we put on these different characters. I like to give the example of when you're hopping onto a plane, and the flight attendant will say something like, oh, hello, Mr. McPherson, you're in an exit row. Have you flown with us before? It's all friendly. And then when they're giving the rules, suddenly it's, and that's appropriate. They put on a different character. Welcoming, friendly, fun, to serious, or what I call resolute. There's also clarity. There's a bit of colour in our voice. We need to use pitch and pace and pause and power, the volume of our voice, very, very carefully. As I said, someone gave me that some time, and I've always really, really liked it. There's also visual skills. Everything about what we do with our hands, what we do with them and for how long, where we put them and don't put them, what we do with our face, our head, and our whole body. And I put them together in what I call the 11 essential visual skills for communication. And I won't run through all of these. If you want to give me a tingle sometime, an email, or contact me, I can give you a code that goes on, a passcode for my website, and it has videos for each one of these. But just a simple one, describing timelines from their perspective. It's a really old one. Someone taught me that in 1976, such a long time ago, when I was doing my dip ed, about how to do timelines in a certain way so that people who are looking at you get it. But quite often we want to do them a way that makes sense to us. So I've done that timeline when I was young, 10-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60, 66. I've done that in a way that I'm pretending I'm you and I'm looking that way. But more on that another time. I learnt when I was a telegram boy way back in the 60s, and there'll be people who say, telegram? Telegram boy? Well, I'll leave that for another time, but in the 60s, and I was told how to deliver a good news telegram and how to deliver a bad news telegram, because they really did come in those two particular types. Congratulations on the job, on the wedding, on the honeymoon or engagement or whatever it happened to be. Sorry about the death in the family. And these were very different. And I was given a bit of a lesson about how to present the good news telegram and how to present the bad news telegram. So, and I've got there also use eye contact wisely, which I'm happy to discuss with you another time. These visual skills are important because every movement you do, every eye contact you do, can be seen as someone else, especially a difficult person, as a reason to get angry with you or complain. Oh, I had to swear at her because she looked at me funny. Oh, you had to yell at her because she had funny eyes and I know what she was thinking. So really be careful. Any look that you do, and I know that we can't help it, our face does give us away, but really do be very, very careful, because difficult people, they'll use it as an excuse. Let's go on to my first thing that I'm really interested in, my first big topic, which is best practice behaviour. And I'll whiz through things quickly. It's all about clarity of standards. It's all about capacity of people to live up to those standards. And I'm sorry, some people can't without a real lot of help. And it's about convention. It's about making sure that these behaviours is the way that we behave in this particular office. And as I said before, some people aren't even sure, is it okay to swear in the office? Well, it sort of depends. And I surround these with principles. Mastering tough conversations. Surprise, surprise, there's 3 parts to this. You need to take control of what I call the conditions. You need to take control of what I call the scripts, and I'm going to give you some scripts to take away. And you need to take control of what I call the deliveries. Now, yes, it's plural, and this is sometimes because you have to deliver a tough conversation more than once. People have said to me so many times, oh, I had that conversation, it didn't work, it's a waste of time. Well, maybe you need to have it again. Maybe you need to review how you gave that tough conversation, what words did you use, what was your vocal component, and what were your visuals like. And once again, that's got some principles that it's embedded in. Deal with difficult people, 3 steps. I'm trying to make it easy for us. That you need to nail the violation. You need to tailor the strategies, and I'll give you this list of strategies shortly. You need to tailor those strategies to the particular needs of the situation. And I think you also need to personalise your approach. What I can do in one situation is not what you can do in another situation. You need to tailor the strategies and then personalise your approach. And that has, surprise, surprise, a whole pile of principles. Just give you a few guiding principles now. I've written a lot of these. Sometimes I see them in books as actual strategies, and I really think they're more just guiding principles. One of them is, don't let the amygdala hijack the conversation. I'm not going to go into the details of the workings of the brain, but the amygdala is a part almost in the middle of the brain, and it's responsible mainly for flight and fight response. What a great thing. Thousands and thousands, tens and tens of thousands of years ago, you're going through the jungle and some animal comes out of the jungle that's going to kill you. You don't want to have to stand there and go, well, let's just weigh this up. That's a big animal. Yes, big teeth, it could kill me. No, you want the amygdala to suddenly just say, I'm out of here, fight or flight. Now, the problem is, as you may have noticed, some people seem to have trouble here because they go off at the slightest thing. If you've ever driven a car, you'll know what I mean. That some people really, the slightest disturbance, the thing that they think something's gone wrong, boy, boom. And you want to keep it under control when you're in that queue at the theatre and you think someone's pushed in. Well, before you just start yelling out, you want to think a little bit. Anyway, we'll leave that for another time. So we're not going to have a psychology lesson. Another thing, guiding principle is do your homework. It sounds so obvious, doesn't it? I'm surprised that people have conversations with people without having done the homework. I know you can't do it right there on the spot, but if you're planning to have a tough conversation with someone like I had with my mother about an aged care facility, do your homework. If my mother had turned around and said, oh, are you allowed to go and look at these places? If I'd said, oh, I'm not sure, that'd be pretty poor. I had to do my homework first. Also be prepared for things which I call the look. There are certain people, when you're having a tough conversation, they have a look. And it's really hard to work out, do they like what I'm saying? Do they hate what I'm saying? Do they hate me? Be prepared for it. And a lot of the time, it doesn't matter what's going on inside their head and their face. Your job is to deliver that conversation. So, don't expect to be thanked. There's surprising how many people around have a tough conversation with someone and say, well, I expected they'd thank me for doing that and pointing it out. No, don't expect it. Accept that things might not go as planned. Things happen. I didn't expect the person to burst into tears. Well, I'm not saying they should have burst into tears, but just be prepared for different reactions. And people say, oh, I know the person. Well, even when you know the person, just be careful. Things don't go always as planned. Be prepared for pain. Some of these tough conversations will live with you for some time. I'm not saying that's good, and I'm not saying there's not things you can do about it. And be prepared for responses you'd rather not get. I got one once from someone who was a senior person in an organisation who I had to talk to them about their timesheet, which they'd made a lot of mistakes on, which worried me because I found it odd that they'd make those mistakes in their favour. And I was surprised about their response. They were a little bit abusive, and I didn't expect it. What we're talking about here is for leadership, it's for management, it's for customer service, it's from relationships, and if only I could spell that word correctly, it would have been better. One of the big mistakes that people use is not using facts. Facts are so important. They are boring and dull, and people miss this out way too often. Another mistake is name calling and labelling. Please, in your tough conversations and dealing with difficult people, get rid of it. And I'm sure now everyone is going, oh, I wouldn't do that. It's amazing the number of people I deal with who say, oh, I wouldn't say that. And then I hear them and they say, oh, John, that's a stupid thing to do. That's ridiculous, that sort of comment. Well, I'm sorry, those sorts of words are very offensive to some people, and I do call them name calling and labelling. Be careful about trying to mind read and guess people's psychological problems. I've seen it too often where people have advocated and even said things like, oh, Bill, sometimes you're just way too confident. Well, why would you say that? Because it doesn't really help. And maybe they are way too confident. Maybe they're not. But we're guessing what's going on inside someone's brain, and it usually does not help. Because as soon as you say something, oh, John, you're way too confident or you're overconfident, their comeback is, oh, I don't feel confident at all. And then you're having this conversation about their confidence when really what you want to talk about is their timesheet, their behaviour, or whatever it happens to be. And the other thing is, we make mistakes, I think, with what we do with our hands and where we look and bits of paper and stuff like that. And all these expressions are important. And these 11 essential visual skills are really, really important. So, sometimes we're stressed, and when we're stressed, we're simply not doing our best, that's for sure. Sometimes even when we're calm, I think half the time when we're calm, we really get this done well, but half the time I don't think we do. And sometimes we're quite agitated. And we've all dealt with people who are way too agitated and excited. They've come back from the conference and they've got to do this, I've got to do that. So we're stressed. Even when we're calm, we have problems, and when we're agitated. So stressed and agitated, we're never at our best, that's for sure. There was what I call an old way of dealing with difficult people, which, as I said, looking at people as all these different types as individual. But I really think that we should treat all these bad behaviours just in the one basket. They break a standard of behaviour. So there's light in the tunnel, and now I'm going to give it to you. It's not a train coming the other way, you'll be pleased to know. So the old way, I think, and it should be the old way, is, and I won't go into this in detail, another time perhaps, you know, people said people were passive, they were aggressive, people were passive-aggressive or assertive. And when the first time I heard that in, I don't know, the 70s, whatever, I never really liked it. And I think it's a lot more complicated than people give it credit for. Well, this communication, they give it communication credit for. So I reckon that sometimes we can be just taking the assertive column. Sometimes we can be diplomatic, and that's where I want us to be. Sometimes we can be assertive and I think reckless, and I think sometimes we can be assertive and dishonourable. I know some people would say, oh, that's not really assertive, but I think that those 9 categories, passive, assertive, aggressive, sort of goes in a continuum from one right up to the other. And I think we can be in all of those categories and be diplomatic, reckless, and sometimes dishonourable. Sometimes it's very diplomatic to be passive and say nothing. So, instill best practice behaviour. There's another spelling mistake. That's no good at all. Clarity. There's a brand new word. It's not very clear at all, is it? We master tough conversations. Let's have a look at these things. What I want you to do is to take control of the conditions. And one of those conditions is the point of your conversation. Now, I said before, it's about getting people to change, people to do something. Well, what's the point of your conversation? If it's just to bawl someone out, just go right ahead. If it's just to get something off the top of your head, well, fine. But be warned, if you don't have a clear point, an end point to your conversation, it does not go as well as it could. How do you control your nerves? I have an acquaintance or a person that I'm helping at the moment who is in a managerial position, and they get very nervous when they are having one of these tough conversations, and they need to have it. Someone is saying they're doing a certain amount of work and they're not, basically lying. And they're so scared of talking to the person. And sometimes nerves are such a problem that they actually need particular help in a professional, from someone who's professional in that area. What will you accept and what won't you accept? What language will you accept in this tough conversation? From you, from the other person? What if they say something and they say, oh, well, I can't do what you want by tomorrow, but how about the next day? Will you accept a compromise? You need to work out what will you accept and not accept, and if necessary, a fallback position. What are the rules and regulations? As I said before, I have dealt with an organisation that helped people who were undergoing disciplinary action, and I've actually been on the other side as a manager taking someone to disciplinary action. I'm amazed that people sometimes get caught out on not knowing the actual rules. And if you have to have the rule book with you at the time, so be it. And what recording will you actually need to do? Sometimes people need to do lots and lots of paperwork afterwards and recording. when you're having this tough conversation, is someone else allowed to be there as your support person or the other person's support person? What if they ask for it to be, I'd like to record it please on my phone? Is this allowed? There's a lot of things that people are being caught out these days. And I'm sorry about that S being on the bottom line. There seems to be no particular reason for that other than my inability to do a slide. The scripts. You need to take control of your scripts. Now, people say to me, scripts, what would you want that for? Who doesn't have a script these days? Even when you go for a job interview, okay, you've written your application and you go to an interview. No, you don't know what they're going to ask, but surely you've got a few scripts worked out. Surely you've thought about what sorts of questions they might ask. As simple as this, Peter, we have read your application and thank you very much for coming in. Could you just tell us a few things about yourself and why you think you'd be really well fitted for this job or whatever it happens to be? Well, it's no good standing there or sitting there and saying, ooh, good question. No, we need to have some scripts worked out. And what I want to talk to you about is what we have is formal scripts I'll give you. You need to make them informal as necessary. You want to abbreviate them as necessary. You want to tailor these scripts, these strategies, and you want to personalise them. And I am into scripts. And if you want to contact me, I'm happy to give them to you. Not a problem. But these are a la Mark McPherson. They come from me and my experience. You need to, as I said, make them yours. You need to tailor them and personalise them to fit your way of operating, your way of speaking. All of these scripts start off with the niceties. Sometimes people don't realise that, of course, it is a script, but you still start off with the usual, good manners and be well behaved and be polite and whatever it happens to be. Here's my first one for you. This one is FEA. It's a simple script. It's done me so well on so many occasions. And although I'm giving you these as my own, and I guess I have made up FEA, but look, these have been around for an awful long time, so I'm not trying to say that I've made up something brand new. The FEA script, it's facts, explain and ask. And let's start off with facts. Facts are what the camera saw. That's it. It's what the camera saw. He came through the door and threw a rock at me. I hope that doesn't happen. But these are not facts. You were rude. You were belligerent. You were stupid. You were arrogant. You were outrageous. You were sexist. It may be true. The person may have been, for example, sexist. But in my case, the way I'm going to use these scripts, it's not a fact. The fact is, Peter, when Susan got up to speak, you said, oh, another woman. Now that is sexist. There's no doubt about that. It's rude. But the fact is, when Susan got up to speak, he said, oh, not another one. That's the fact of the case. These aren't facts either. You've let everyone down and you're not a team player. If you have to have a conversation with somebody about their poor behaviour and you start off with, you're not a team player, and they say, well, yes, I am, and you say, no, you're not, and then you have to explain anyway what the facts are to explain to them that they're not a team player, you may as well just start with the facts. So, explain. You need to explain why it's a problem. So let me give you the one about the timesheet because it's a real one in my life. I dealt with a fellow called Michael. And I said to Michael, and I had the sheet here in front of me, and I said, Michael, 3 times this week you've come in here and you've written on your timesheet Monday 9 o'clock, Tuesday 9 o'clock, Wednesday 9 o'clock, but I've noticed here, because I saw you, that you didn't come in till 9:30, whatever it happens to be. We'll do those hands and those visuals another time. But I had to explain, so that's just the facts. Not you've let me down again, or you're hopeless, or you're a cheater. All those things might be true, but they're not the facts. Then I have to explain to him what the problem is. Now, this is for you to work out. For me, I took the route of, Michael, I have to sign your timesheet as a true and accurate record of your attendance, and I can't do that knowing that this is not correct. So that was it. Other people might say, you've broken the rules. Other people might say whatever it happens to be. But the facts then explain. And when you're explaining these facts, be very careful. And when you're telling the facts and you're explaining what the problem is, be really careful about your hand movements and your facial expressions. The next thing is to ask a question. And sometimes the questions are really, really simple. With Michael, I said, Michael, is there something I need to know? That was my question. Facts, explain the problem. Is there something I need to know? That was the question I asked. And he could have said all sorts of things. Oh, sorry, I did this, or sorry that happened, or I worked late and I thought it would be okay if I did this to make up for it, or whatever. He might have had a reason. Sometimes the asking is there something we can do together to fix this situation? That's a great one with teenagers, by the way. I've experienced this where teenagers seem to really like that because it's about them getting some power maybe or some input, I don't know. But how can we work together to fix this? Is there something I can do to help you get to work on time? That's 3 times this week you've made that problem. It has created that. 3 times this week you've made that mistake on the report. It has created a problem for myself because I've had to stay back and correct it. Is there something we can do to help you make sure we don't make those mistakes in the future? Something like that. Anyway, that's my FEA script, and it's been really useful because sometimes people come back and they are really, really remorseful and really helpful. My next script is fewer. And some people will say, oh, it's so hard remembering these scripts. My experience is that people only need 1 or maybe 2, and they use it over and over again in their line of work. So you don't have to remember all these particular scripts. But fewer. Once again, it's a formal script. You can make it informal. You can abbreviate it. You can tailor it, and you should tailor it to particular circumstances, and you should most certainly personalise it. So, what does fewer stand for? Well, you won't be surprised, but the first 2 is facts and explain. Now, this is for a case where you have to go from from FEA up to fewer. You're sort of upping the ante a little bit. You need to tell the person what you want from them rather than ask them a question and give them the opportunity to help out. So, facts, we've got that right. It's what the camera saw. It's not your interpretation of it. And I know it's so tempting sometimes to look at people straight in the face and just say, look, what are you trying to do? You're trying to ruin the business? I know you want to say that, but please just make it dull and boring. The next thing is explain, and we've talked about explaining and how you explain. You need to be really, really careful how you do that. So, this is just Mark McPherson ideas off the top of my head. They won't suit everyone. They will not suit you personally, perhaps. So this is just an idea, and this is the formal sense. You need to abbreviate it, and you also need to make it informal. Peter, you have arrived at work, and it's 9:15 a.m. All staff have to be at their stations ready for work by 9 a.m. That's the facts. Boring and dull. But it's so much better than saying, what time do you call this? Oh, the late shift has just walked in. All that sort of stuff. I know you want to say it. So do I sometimes. The explanation is you have broken a requirement of your employment. In addition, it's a problem as other staff have had to do extra work to cover for you. Only one of those is necessary, but somewhere along, explain why it's a problem. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink of water. Some people sometimes say to me, oh, you shouldn't have to explain it, it should be obvious. Yes, it should be. But you know what? There's people around there who break our standards and they think in the pursuit of happiness, in freedom of speech and whatever else, they can do whatever they like. But that's a good one where FEA works incredibly well. But if you have to go to the next level, you have to go to the next level. There's another one, but I'm wary of the time, so I'm not going to worry about that. The W is for want. You have to tell people sometimes what you want. I want you to be at your workstation by 9 a.m. from now on. And what we do with this hand and where we put it is always important. But when I tell people what I want, I tend to look at them in the face. Now, how you use the visuals when you're giving this script, delivering this script, is really important, and we do not have time to do it. But it is really important where you look and when. So, it's what you want. Michael, what I want you to do is to make sure that your timesheet is a true and accurate record from now on. That's it. Darling teenager of mine, that's the third time this week I've told you to tidy up your room and it is not tidied. That's a problem because I expect everyone in this house to pull their weight, or whatever it happens to be, or follow the rules, whatever it happens to be. What I want you to do now, before dinner, is to go into your room and tidy it up. No, now. Tell them what you want. And only you can work out what you want. Only you. You know your workplace, you know your family, you know who you deal with. You have to explain why it'll be a good thing. Now, this sounds like a long script. It takes about 26 seconds as a maximum, I found, to deliver it. But you've got to explain, the reason why, like you want your child to tidy up their room, you explain why it'll be a good thing. That'll be great because it'll make sure all of us in this house are working together. I don't know, whatever it is for you. If you can get here on a time at 9 o'clock, that'd be just great because that means we're all in tune, or we're all abiding by the rules, or whatever it happens to be, or there'll be no pressure on other people. Michael, if you can do that for me, get your timesheet up to date, that'll be great because it means it takes a lot of weight off me, or whatever it happens to be. Okay. Now, there's a thing called rewards and penalties. And this is a tough one. With young children, it's easy. No pocket money for you. Teenage son, if you don't put petrol in the car, you can't borrow it. It's really quite simple. Sometimes our rewards and punishments are easy. In the workplace, it's a little bit difficult. There's no gold stars. Sometimes the only reward is, if you can do that for me, it'll be terrific. There's no, oh, I'll let you go to the conference, or I'll give you a raise. You can't do that sometimes. So a lot of the time, it's simply a case of, if you can do that, it'll be terrific. Or if you can, I said to Michael, if you could do that, this conversation is finished. I didn't want to know about it anymore. There was big issues, and that really wasn't the biggest issue out at the time. So these rewards aren't always amazing, but it's good to be able to give some reward. So that's the fewer script. I'm going to go through another one. I'm very wary of the time. I call it the anatomical script. As you can know, I do like acronyms. Sometimes things don't work out well with acronyms, but these ones did. The anatomical script is a great script for just simply telling someone something. No punishments involved, you need to tell someone. This worked really well with a particular organisation that I was working with because they had a lot of queries from people, and sometimes people would interrupt them and they would become abusive halfway through. And by having this script, they just stuck to it, they said what they had to say, and they could move on. So, this sounds detailed, I get it, okay? I really do get it. So let's break it up into what I call hello, give and finish. So, let's start at the beginning. And you'll know this stuff. None of this is going to be a surprise to you. You're going to say, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. But for some organisations to be able to have something they can work on like this, a script from start to finish, is really useful. So, get their attention. Sometimes you already got their attention. Sometimes you have to say, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones. Excuse me, whatever it happens to be. Using the name is good. Giving some acknowledgement is great. Sometimes it's as simple as thank you for allowing me to tell you something, or thank you for paying attention. Thank you for bringing in that material. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. give some acknowledgement to people. No, it's not giving them power. It's not giving all your apparel away. It's just giving some acknowledgement. And I know that I worked with an organisation who people on the front desk used to deal with people who used to come in with applications for certain things, to be able to say, thank you so much for having a go at filling out the form. Things like that went down a treat. I like when you're giving to, here's some options for you, some things to say. Sometimes it's good to tell people what you will do and what you won't do. Sometimes it's important to say to people, look, today I will most certainly look at your application. Today I will look at what you've written, why you think you deserve a raise. I'll do it. But what I will not do and cannot do is guarantee that you will get the raise. I can't guarantee that your application will be successful. Tell people what you can do and you will do and won't do. Sometimes these boundaries, sometimes this framework, sometimes this sets something that's really important for people. Otherwise, they have expectations that you can't meet. Give people options. People seem to like options. I think once again, maybe it's about giving people a little bit of power or control over their life. And you do this naturally. People will say, well, look, there's three things you can do. And doing that, rather than just saying there are three things, can be helpful. But then I see people sometimes on counters actually grab, say, a biro and say, so the first thing is, and they'll put that down somewhere, and they'll put a cup down somewhere else, and they'll maybe use a hand or a stapler or whatever it is to be the third thing. So these are the three things. That can be really useful. Sometimes you've only got two things. So here's a little example that came up recently. Someone was working on the front line of an organisation and actually said, no, there's three things you can do with your application. The first thing is you can fill it in now, handwrite it now. You'd have to go over there and do it. The second thing is you can take it away with you and fill it in and come back. And the third thing is you can come back with someone who can help you if you need someone to help you translate any of the material, whatever. So it's those three things. And when the person on the other side of the counter said, oh, but what I'd really like, why can't you fill it in? No, that's not one of the three options. This. So it's nice to bring them back to that. Options can be good. People say, oh, I've only got two options. Fine. This or that. What do you want me to do today? I can do this, I can do that. Sometimes options are really good. It lets them choose. Sometimes people need to make decisions and they need to make them. Sometimes you just need to give simple messages. Sometimes it's as simple as that. If you want to make a formal complaint to the mayor, the material is on the website for that. That's the message. But sometimes there's detailed information. I did see someone who works for a council actually in the park recently who was accosted by someone. They were doing some maintenance work. In fact, they were cutting some grass and someone was complaining about they're cutting the grass too early, stuff like that. And this sort of script was so useful for them because I had worked with them before to be able to say, I see what you're talking about. That's the acknowledgement. They didn't know their name, but they said, I understand what you're talking about. It is a concern. And then their information, their options, they didn't give them options in this case, but they gave them some information. Look, the information was, look, I've been sent here today, but if you would like to make a formal submission, blah, blah, blah. It was nice to do that. Now, I move on because this anatomical script, there's a lot to it, as you could imagine. The same with fear and fewer. Cut the blah. Too many of us want to say the extra stuff. And look, I hope everything works out well for you. It's nice to say some of this extra stuff, but usually when you've got a message to give, options for people, if you start saying too much extra stuff, it confuses them. We want to say things at the end of giving someone, like Michael about his timesheet, oh, I'm so sorry it came to this, Michael. I hope we can still be friends. Of course you do, but saying that extra stuff is rarely helpful. So cut the blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it's good when you're finishing to just check on agreements. So Michael, you will do that for me? Yes, Mark, I will. You will be here by 9 o'clock whatever it happens to be. You will tidy up your room, whatever it's been. Sometimes it's nice to have agreements after you've got options. Say, options is a good example where you have agreements at the end. So you're going to take this away, just recap, you're going to take this away, you're going to fill it in and bring it back. Would you like me to make an appointment for you? That sort of thing. Now leave. Finish it. They've developed something I noticed in call centres over the last 20 years, and it's two things. How have I helped you today? That is, it's finished. Now I'm going to ask you how good I was. And the other one is there anything else I can help you with? That means we've finished with that. Is there anything else? I think it's quite clever. And I've seen that used in many places that works well. Somewhere along the line, you've got to end the conversation, and too many of us are not sure how to do it. So that's the attention, name, acknowledge, and I'm happy to pass that on to you if you need it. And I'm sure some of you have taken notes anyway. At the end of these, sure, niceties, shake hands, or whatever it happens to be, please, you do whatever you find appropriate for your particular situation. So, here's a few other little scripts which I like to throw in. Sidley, stop, I don't like it. Great one for young people, of course. Stop, I don't like it. You don't have to explain, well, because when you say that, or when you touch my backside, or whatever it happens to be, I feel offended. You don't have to say that. Just say, stop, I don't like it. Stop is good enough. And I've always liked that picture of that particular woman with the hand out. AIMS are what I call assertive instant messages, and we use them all the time. I saw a woman in a cafe I was in a while ago. She was terrific. She had two young kids, or two primary school age kids with her, and they were mucking up a little bit. They weren't bad, but they were mucking up a little bit. And she turned around and said, "Really?" Just like that. Really? Now, these kids knew what that meant. That's an assertive instant message, as is stop. What? Come on. All that sort of stuff. They only work, though, I found, if you've done the previous scripts, like fewer. If this woman had not told these kids in the past what the standards of behaviour were, what the rules were, what sort of behaviour she expected from them, what she wanted from them, then saying really can be met with really what? So make sure when you use assertive instant messages, which we've all used, just make sure that they're going to be understood. Because the last thing you want is a debate with someone. And I see these I used to work in a licensed premise, and you'd see people say, "Oh, come on, mate." And all you'd get back from a patron who'd been drinking a bit was, "Come on, where, mate? Yeah, come on." So you've got to be really careful. And look, there's ways of disagreeing with people, and one of them is to simply say, "I don't agree. I have a different point of view." And I've seen people debate about things. "Oh, that's not true. I reckon that's ridiculous." If you have a different point of view, say, "Look, I don't agree. I think Bill Smith is doing a great job. Oh, I don't see it like that." Now, you might be called to account and explain, but sometimes all you have to say is simple things like, "I don't agree," or "I see things differently. I have a different recollection of that." Not, "You're wrong." That's a different message entirely. And as I said, really just cut this blah. There's just too much of it. Just cut it out. Here's a little bit of one that I think is important: how to respond to criticisms and put downs. I've seen this explained in all sorts of terms. I don't like terms particularly like fogging. I just prefer to call it what it is. Look, you can not respond to criticism. You do not have to respond to every bit of criticism that someone launches at you. So you can not respond. You can agree with someone. If someone says, "Oh, you're not a good listener," well, you can say, "Oh, look, sometimes I don't listen well." But be careful about those sort of techniques, because if someone comes back with you, "Yeah, that's for sure, you most certainly don't," then you start having a debate about that. So just be careful. But one of the great techniques for a put down is this one. when you said such and such, it felt like a put down. Is that the way you meant it? Now, I could give you some examples, but we don't have time to do that in this particular presentation. But, someone says, oh, you've taken off a bit of weight, but boy, there's more to take off. Well, that's pretty rude. But one of the ways of dealing with that is saying, look, when you said I could take off some more weight, it felt like you were having a go at me. Is that right? Is that the way you meant it? Was that your intention? Now, that particular technique, that little script, I got from somewhere, and if someone wants to own it and say, oh, I invented it, well, please. But I think it's one of those generic, general ones. But it's not for the faint-hearted. It's sometimes easier with some of those put-downs to simply ignore it. But when you said that, when you said blah, 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 it felt like you were having a go at me. Am I right? So, dealing with difficult people, and I'm going to move on. Nailing the violation. Nailing the violation is important. It's about the standard. What standard of behaviour did they break? Strategies. Now, let me run through these for you. I have a list of strategies which I work for dealing with difficult people. The first one is this: safety first. There's a few different strategies under that big heading. The next one, leave them to it. You do not have to respond to everybody. You do not have to go past, if a certain person annoys you, you don't have to go past their desk. Now, some people say, oh, that's not being assertive. No, it's not necessarily, except it is making a decision. I call it being diplomatically assertive. It's being smart. If you find a particular person annoys you at a party, you steer away from them. There's another group of strategies like anatomical, which I call saying what needs to be said and moving on. Sometimes you need to ask questions of people. Sometimes you need to get stuff from people. You forge ahead and get the question. They're rude, they're picking their nose, I don't know what they're doing. Sometimes it's best to just forge ahead, do it. There's a group of strategies there. You can manage the influences on people's behaviour. There's a group of strategies here. I think we've all had situations where someone's not behaved well or not done the work they should have. And what's the influence? Well, they don't know how to use it properly. They don't know how to use that software program. That's what the trouble is, maybe. Sometimes you can change the physical environment. This sounds crazy, but when I was a manager in a particular workplace, I moved two adults apart from each other. It was like I was back a school teacher. I physically moved them. The easiest way of dealing with their poor behaviour, separate them. That'll stop the sniping. Simple as that. Yes, I could have taken some time and got them aside and talked to them. The easiest way on that particular occasion, I changed the physical environment. You can change the social environment. I made a mistake one time of putting two people together on a particular project, and I didn't know that they didn't get on. So I changed that by changing the social environment in that office, by changing where projects around. I should say another way about changing people's behaviour is I'm amazed at how sometimes people can placate an angry person. It's not a skill that all of us actually have, but sometimes people can calm people down. You've seen them on the front desks of organisations. Quite amazing. Give it to them straight, lay it on the line. FEA is a great script for that. This is what's happened. It's a problem. What's going on? Or how can I help? The FEWER script, FEWER, is a great one for laying it on the line. And sometimes we've got to do it. AIMS, AIMS, assertive instant messages, is also a way of laying it on the line. No. You do that again, you're out. Simple as that. There's also that one of dealing with put-downs, still methods of dealing with put-downs. But we're going to up the ante here. There are times when we are not willing to, and we need to be willing to go to the next level. That is, John, that's the third time you've used the F word in this conversation. You have to leave. I told you what would happen if you did not tidy up your room. Your pocket money is now forfeited for this week. No, you can't do this. John, 3 times now I've told you not to be rude to Susan, she's speaking. I'm going to speak to you later about that, and it's a serious matter. Sometimes you have to go at the next level. It has to go on it's a counselling session, I believe that it's called in most organisations. But sometimes you need to deliver the penalty. And that's somewhere too often I see people balk at because, oh, it's too hard, or there's too much paperwork. Well, don't come to me and say you need help and then say it's all too hard. So, dealing with difficult people, nail the violation. What is the problem? The problem is that the violation is we have an expectation in this office that people will be at work on time, that people will come to staff meetings on time. That's the violation. Not that you're a smarty pants, not that you're a rat bag, not that you're trying to undermine me. This might be all true. The problem is you came to the staff meeting late 3 times, and when you came in, you started to talk, which disrupted the speaker, whatever it happens to be. Nail that violation. Okay? So then you need to tailor those strategies, and you need to then personalise your approach. Everyone has their own way of doing things. Some people are good at just the hand movement. Other people aren't. Other people have the look, whatever it happens to be. So, as we're nearing our time together, let's have a little bit of a recap. Look, I just want people to get on. I just want people to have a good time at work, at home, and in social settings. That's really what we want. So, just to recap, because some people really have asked me about dealing with difficult people. There's a really major one. Look, there are a set of principles around that. Actually, oh wow, that's actually not the right slide for that. My greatest apology. One of the things you can do is work about how to create standards in your own workplace. This is not always easy, and it can be time consuming. But I see in workplaces where people have things on the wall, you should be respectful. The sad thing is some people don't get that. Respectful means certain language is not allowed. We don't do this, we don't do that. We come to work on time. Whatever happens, we help out each other. Sometimes you've got to be a little bit more specific than simply just say, be respectful. I wish it wasn't like that, but unfortunately, sometimes it is. So you need to get these standards right, and it requires a bit of work. You need to define them, and you need to declare them. They are everywhere. Do not be shocked when people say, oh, we don't want a workplace where there's lots of rules. No, I get that. But, you know, society's pretty used to rules. We handle them pretty well. We're used to things you're allowed to do and not allowed to do in a park. And can you make sure that your standards are really on a fine line? There's no grey area. As I said, things like no swearing. Well, if there's no swearing, there's no swearing. Not, oh, but it's okay if you do this, or it's okay if you're having a bad day, or if it's okay if you use the swear word, but you're not talking about people, you're talking about work. Well, if that's the case, make it clear, because you told me that word was not allowed, and now you're saying it is allowed in some cases. Just be careful. And aim high with standards. Let's not muck around. Let's really aim them nice and high. I'm not going to worry about qualities of good standards, but let's say this. In our time together, and it has gone quickly, and I know it's also been hard work for many of you. Look, real life scenarios, that's what I work with. That's what's needed all the time. Real things from your life experience. Let's work together. Let's apply those to mastering tough conversations, dealing with difficult people. Let's use those steps, as I said, taking control of the conditions, taking control of the scripts, taking control of the deliveries, and dealing with difficult people, nailing the violation, tailoring those strategies, and also personalising your approach. So, this is me. Please get in contact with me if you can. If you want to, please do ask me any questions. I will answer them. Tomorrow is a rather busy time, but please. Email, LinkedIn is a great place to also ask me questions about certain things and or make comments. I speak and present. I educate and train, I coach and I mentor. I do a lot of coaching programs, a lot of people, especially right at the moment. Sometimes these are simply by phone, not always necessarily by Zoom or in person. We've covered a lot of material. Beware some people because they just simply don't seem to get it. Okay? And you meet with these people and do not try and work out what's going on inside their mind because it'll drive you crazy. Let's just try and deal with the behaviour. Sure, give some sympathy, give some care, please. Let's take care of other people, cut them a bit of slack, as I call it. But don't be overly concerned about why. The other thing is what we've dealt with tonight, or this webinar, this presentation, is not just for the workplace. Young people have heaps and heaps of tough conversations and deal with difficult people. Telling someone you're not going to get into a car with them because they've been drinking is really hard for some teenagers. They do need a bit of care. So we're going to instill best practice behaviour, master tough conversations. We're going to deal with difficult people, put those together. We have a fantastic workplace. Remember, scripts to me is what it's really all about. Be prepared. That's what that is all about. And where to from here? Well, if you want to get in contact with me, please go right ahead. I'm happy to do that. I gave you some information. Go back to work. Look after yourselves. Look after your friends and family, and please stay safe. And after a tough day at work, wherever it happens to be, after a tough conversation, dealing with difficult people, you find what you need or what works best for you. If it's a bubble bath and classical music, so be it. If it's in the park with your dog, please just do what you need to find what you can do to look after yourself. So that's about it from me. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, have a great time. Thank you so much for being with me. And look, go on your merry way, look after yourself, and I do hope to speak to you soon. All the very best. Cheerio.